This is kind of a little bit newer for me, teaching you guys at your skill level. And it's going to be completely different. Theirs is a lot more, I mean, it's really basic, like first, second, third year apprentice level, what I'm teaching over there. And then also we got an interpreter. So hopefully today I don't need that, right? You guys should all have the Carel like shortcuts. It's just like hotkeys on how to deal with the controller. And it's mainly for the Pico 3, which the Pico 3 is this guy right here. I'll pass it around. That way you guys can actually see what we're talking about. The first thing, the air-cooled password is basically Air 19. Okay? It says the water-cooled password is Stack, but that's for the older machines. I've never had to use that yet. It's always been Air 19. That'll get you into the factory stuff. For addressing, just like it says during power up, you're going to want to push the alarm in the up buttons. The master is always 30. The slaves are like 1 through 10, just for an example. And if you have a free cool unit, that would be that would be an address as 31. Okay. Now, just in case you guys are buying spare parts, if you buy a master and something were to happen to a slave, you can't just put the slave in and run it. It automatically thinks that it's a master. You can't just change the address and it's not going to automatically think it's a slave. You actually have to reprogram the whole Pico 3 to get it to do that. Okay? And how you would reprogram it, you'd have a laptop, you'd have some software from Carel, you'd plug this device in and this in, you'd put the software that you're looking for on this, you'd actually plug this right into that Pico 3 with power on. You'd shut like circuit breakers off on the compressors, kill the comm wire, and you would actually have to download it with this device. It looks just like a mouse.
Does anything pop up on the screen while you're doing that?
Really, it's like all it says upload. You'll see some lights blinking on that. Okay, and it takes about 5 minutes. It'll start going faster and faster with those blinking lights. And then you'll actually hear a sound, it'll stop. And if for some reason it's loud in the mechanical room or whatever you're doing, you've walked away, if you come back and you hit the button, it'll make that sound again. It's not going to it won't allow it to re-download a second time.
Is this just a standard phone cord or is this a special 6-prong? Just wonder if if you were in
You should have no
30
need to.
feet away.
You should have no need to put a longer cord on it. We just plug it right in, hit the start button, and go.
Downloads program.
So you can't just drop a master and it's gone well.
I mean, does that make sense about the whole master-slave thing?
Sorry, I'm getting a cut.
Okay, so for example, let's say you got a job site, you got an extra master, controller there, or a slave controller there. This just kind of popped up on me. You got an extra slave controller, but you don't have a master, and the master just goes down. You can't take the slave and put it in the master spot and change the address and have it think that it's a master controller. It won't do it. The only way you'd actually be able to do it, change the address to the master, take that guy, put the software on it that you need, download it to it, and when it sees that it's actually got the master address, it'll actually basically pull in the master software.
So we can keep this one?
No.
I think you have to have the master to keep the slaves running.
On most programs, and this is where Multistack is a little different. There are what's called an FRM package, and it's fail to run mode. So it's for really critical job sites, like an embassy, a data center, where they do not want it to go down. On those ones, the fail to run modes, if the master gets dropped and the slaves don't see it, they will light up and start running on their own, okay? Normally, most programs, if the master gets dropped out, you would actually have to have somebody go to the roof. There's a manual off auto switch. You'd actually have to take every one of those modules and select it over to manual, and then it would start running on its own. And by doing that, you actually bypass a couple of the safeties. So you really need to make sure that everything's good. Power phase monitor and the flow switches. Yeah. Yeah, you better make sure that you really want it to run.
Yeah, okay.
Okay? The fail to run mode, they actually put a phase monitor in every single module, so it's more designed for a critical environment that something could happen, and you don't want to wait for a technician to show up, maybe an hour, 2, 3 hours, you know, for that person to show up. All right, to clear the load profile, and the load profile, we're going to get into it a little bit later, but you're going to do that while viewing the load profile. You're going to hold down the alarm, the down button and the alarm buttons, okay? And at times you got to go into the system variables and make sure they're unlocked if somebody's put a different password in there, and that's not the factory stuff. That's actually in case your customers lock that out. The load profile is actually a profile from, it'll go from 0 to 10, like 11 to 20, and it does that in increments all the way to 100%, and you can see how many hours are on that machine. So you actually know how that machine runs throughout the year, okay? And where does that come into play? You got an emergency service call, you've never been there before, it's hot out. You can actually go into the load profile. You can actually look at where that machine's been running percentage-wise, and then you know. I had an instance where I flew out. It was 110 degrees out. I ended up getting in the load profile, and I realized that they'd only been running the machine at 50% the entire time. So it was like, guys, we got plenty of capacity here. There's no need to worry. Just give me some time, and I'll figure out what's going on. Okay? Compressor run hours to clear them. I mean, that's helpful if you're changing a compressor out and you want to clear that log. That way you're starting from scratch. Program version. If the factory sends you one, plug it in before you plug the COM wire into it. Definitely always verify that they sent you the right version. Okay, that's pretty simple. The main menu of the master control or on the slave. Just push the program in the up button. And sometimes those buttons are clunky. You might have to push them 2 or 3 times, okay? But it'll pop up. Usually it seems like the first 2 times it'll disappear if you let the buttons go. The 3rd time you push them, it'll actually lock into place. So you can write it down if you need to. Return all variables to default. Okay. They do make this confusing. On the newer stuff, you got to do program and up at the 12-second count, and you're also going to want to do the alarm and down afterwards. Okay, that's actually what they call a factory reset. There's times where you got to do that. Everything in there is just going to wipe it clean, and then you're basically going to be starting over from factory default. So if you're having to do this, the best thing to do, get some paper out, start writing all your settings down. The factory settings, the customer settings, everything that you possibly can. Okay? And there's some of the programs you're allowed to go in and actually hit save and save some of the settings. So before you do a factory reset, if the software's got the ability to do it, go in there and hit save.
Why would you ever reset it, just in case it locked up or something?
It locks up. Also, when you put new software on, if you're doing that, you got to do a factory reset. A new board from the factory, even though they're doing it there, sometimes just in shipping. A lot of times when I do the startup, they'll be all kind of scrambled, and I got to do it myself. So it's usually one of the first things I do on a startup, is to wipe everything. We got any of those sheets around?
Here, I'm good.
Someone's fucking working, jackass.
Probably home fucking alive.
Knock one off real quick.
All right, let's see here. So now we're reset compressor run hours. I think we've already done that. Clear the fault review. If you got a ton of faults, you can go into the fault review screen, hit program and up, and you'll actually wipe them all out. And talking about that, so let's say you got to work on a unit, you're doing maintenance maybe on mod 2, you you gotta shut the power off. If you kill the power to that, you'll actually cause usually a COM failure on the entire machine. Everything will cycle off. It'll come back on, right? But it just throws a blurb out there. So just take the COM wire, unplug it, then kill power to that module. You'll save yourself from getting those faults and shutting the whole machine down when it's running.
That's when you clear the fault.
No, like if you have to do maintenance to it, but you're gonna cause an alarm.
Oh.
So I'm just, it kind of brings up in my head that, hey,
Oh.
you know, you might start seeing those faults in the fault log and like, hey, what's going on? It could be, hey, guys are working on the machine, so they're gonna be causing it by doing that. It's another tattletale on that COM failure. It's kind of a tattletale if something's been going on and guys have just been going up and resetting it because they're killing power to that one module, but it's shutting everything down. You kind of know that somebody's been going up there resetting alarms. Okay.
You can't say, oh, we haven't touched it.
Yeah, we had an issue where the contractor didn't put a flow switch in and froze up 4 out of 9 modules, and they were saying, no, we weren't resetting anything, and it was a telltale. I mean, it was like, you know, a module would lock up, and then all of a sudden, just we'd have a COM failure, and lo and behold, the whole machine would start back up.
Yeah.
All right. As you see, display version programming up at the main screen. You can adjust screen contrast. You can change time to standard if you want. There's also some other little notes in here that I've just found in the manuals, like the LAC minimum position. That's a low ambient kit. Typically, they're always set from 10 to 20% to allow the liquid to back up into the condenser at hot conditions. And then there's some notes here for the MS machines. Those are the water-cooled machines, and all machines with valves. And this valve thing is actually Belimo valves that are on the evaporators, typically, okay? So we have machines that are variable flow, and then there's also machines that are VME, which is a variable end plate, which I'm not even gonna get into tonight. You guys don't have any of those done, do you?
Mm-mm.
Good.
But make sure you tell them that if you shut the controller off, the valve opens.
On the LAC?
Yeah, when you're recovering refrigerant, so you don't have to, when you're recovering refrigerant out of flat plates, heat exchangers on the chillers.
Why are you looking at me, Dave?
I should be looking at, where's Brian at?
Yeah, if you're shutting the power off, you're gonna want to open up like the EEV. I typically have this tool here, so I just use it to open it up. There's also a liquid line solenoid valve. There's a bypass on the bottom of it, so I'll typically just open that guy up as well. And then on that end, I'm good there. But on the Belimo end, for like variable flow, typically I will actually just have the guys crawl in and actually take the actuator off and open it up. And I do that because I've had overseas where the guys get in there and start playing with stuff, and now they've clocked it wrong, so I just don't trust them. So I just make them crawl in the machine, take the actuator off, and then I can actually verify that it's manually opened. And then we have programming information on an unprogrammed Pico 3 board setup. What you're going to want to do, if there's no program in it at all, you're going to want to power it up. You're going to want to change the address depending on what you're going to try to use it for, okay? Are you trying to use it for a slave? And this is kind of going into that whole story once again. You're trying to use it for a master. If you're trying to use it for a slave, pick the module number that it's going to be in, whether it's 2, 5, 6, whatever. That's going to be your address, typically. If it's the master, go ahead and pick the master address. Put that in, power it down, power it back up, put your key in that's passing around, and then go ahead and download that software. You're going to want to make sure that all your compressor contactors are off. You don't want those banging on, okay? If you're doing the whole machine, then pull all the comm wires, shut all the breakers off on the whole machine, go through the whole machine, load up all the software, okay? On the newer machines, you're going to put the comm wire back on, go to the master, do a factory reset, and then go ahead and start putting all your set points in. And then go ahead and I usually shut the power off one more time, turn it back on, and just, without turning the breakers back on to the compressors, just kind of see if everything seems somewhat normal. I know Todd, we were at one in Seattle, and things started kind of going crazy on us. Contactors were pulling in, chattering, and we actually had to re-download the software again.
Compressors were turning on when it was in off mode.
Yeah.
It was crazy.
So you want to make sure the circuit breakers are off when you start playing around with downloading software or putting like a new Carel controller in. You just want to make sure that, hey, everything seems normal before you start throwing power back on this stuff. All right. I think you guys can pretty much read the shortcuts for yourself. This tool here, I typically use it to program the VFDs, the condenser fan filters. It's when you want to do them quick and fast. You program one, Yakisawa, you plug that in, copy it, and then you can go to another one, paste it. You can do all of them in just under a few minutes. This is that EEV tool. This one here is the flow sensor tool. So there are flow sensors on the evaporators on some of the machines, not all of them. They're electronic. That's actually how you can program them. Typically, if they're out of calibration, just replace them.
Now, is this just for the Yakisawa key?
Yep.
Okay. And you guys are going away from those though, right?
No, Yakisawa is the one
That's
that
the
they're staying.
one.
Yeah. This one here, this is a remote screen. That'll actually read exactly what the master's doing. So we'll talk about it. There are some readings that you have to get at the master that you don't get at the slaves when you're doing maintenance. If you got a pretty big machine or it's set up in a configuration where you have to walk around pipes all the time, it's a pretty good investment to get one of those because you can actually be at the slave, plug into it, and you can actually read exactly what the master's reading. You get through your maintenance a lot quicker that way. Not walking back and forth.
On this flow tool that Travis has right here, so you would disconnect the wires from the sensor and plug that in,
Yep.
and then that would tell you what the switch is doing.
That's how you program it for how much GPM you want
So you got,
for it
okay,
to
so
turn on and off.
you load a program in that, or
No.
that button is up on the top?
No, there's like you gotta like hold it down for so many seconds or something. It's a little clunky.
Yeah, it
Oh,
seems
yeah.
funky.
Oh yeah. They had me do it once at the factory. I've never had to do it. One fail, and it was basically like they had an extra one on site, and even the factory told me once they kind of go out of calibration, just throw them in the garbage. Don't even try to reuse them. And you can imagine in an embassy, once it's already kind of failed, you don't want to
Yeah,
really
it's done.
take the chance of leaving it in there.
Yeah.
Let's just throw it in the garbage, make them get a new one, put another one in. And usually the embassies have a lot of spare parts just ready to go. So,
That's awesome.
yeah.
Drawing point blank, and narrow road.
So,
Down at Tacoma? There is no narrow road. It's either down or
big drive
Is that your echo mic?
Alex is coming in one way, go out style.
Yeah,
You walk
Come in
down.
general.
no.
All right, I'll just go over like, I know this is going to be a little bit more than Carel. Kind of, hey, things to watch out for while you're working on one of these. You're going to have dryer, receiver, compressors. Some of these are single circuit, some are dual circuit. You got your slave, obviously your manual off, auto switch here. If you're going to be bypassing safeties with this, they will have a warning right here. Just to kind of heads up, they will give you a warning on that. All right, transformer, you're gonna have your VFDs, pressure contactors, some breakers. Some of these have fuses in them. You cannot take the fuses out unless you shut the breaker off, okay? Something just to look out for. Some of them also have gauges mounted on them. I don't really care for them, but they do it.
Go back to so on the white square with has got like the alarm light on it.
Yeah.
That's a auto and like a bypass?
Yeah, so it's manual mode, it's off, and then auto. So auto means the master's gonna take control. Off is you're gonna just cycle the module off. And if you go to manual, on this one here, because you have that warning, you're gonna bypass the phase monitor, you're gonna bypass your flow switch, and the slave is just gonna take control. Okay?
As I recall, Keith, it only runs one compressor though, right?
No, it can run two.
Well, 'cause I've never seen it run two.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, it will do it. Yeah, there's some pretty simplistic set points that they do on the slaves.
And then as they're controlling for temperature, is there something you can adjust? Like, is it just going up to 44-degree water and it's just gonna rock and roll?
No, you can adjust it. There's gonna be set points in there, okay?
Just go into set points and you can move it around.
Yep, and you know, sometimes, hey, when you're doing maintenance or whatever, and you just gotta, or a quick check on something, it's a good way to do it, as long as you
Yeah.
know the flow switch is good, phase monitor. You know, I usually tell the customer overseas, don't touch it, just cause they just don't know enough.
Yeah.
Okay? Alright.
Depends on how slow you are, right?
Yeah, and this stuff is gonna be very basic, once again, but mainly it's the photos that we can get into and kinda talk about it. Yeah, I don't think I need to tell you guys to switch stuff off to work on it. And then once again, here's that switch that we're talking about. Okay. Things to look out for definitely on these machines. I've seen these guys crack. Roto locks come loose. And then the heat exchangers, that's gonna be a big thing. Here's your chemical. And when you think about these heat exchangers, the passages are only 2 millimeters. They're not like a typical chiller where they're like 5/8, right? So they're super easy to plug up. A lot of the machines that I see will actually have a dual basket strainer right in front of the machine, so you can actually service that while the machine's still running. And then the main modules actually have strainers inside each module, okay? And typically if you start having problems where somebody hasn't cleaned those strainers that are in the machine, typically it's the last one on the line. You'll start seeing low chilled water leaving temp alarms, because all the mud just kind of goes to that end module. Glycol feeder if they're equipped. You do see this on some of the critical stuff.
Have you seen anything besides mesh strainers do good? I mean, I know that's what it comes with, but before the mesh strainers, anything that's out there?
Typically, they always do a dual basket strainer, right? That's usually the very first thing, and then after that, it's the strainers that are actually in the chiller, and then that's typically it.
No other kind of weird water treatment that you've seen?
Well, overseas they'll have a whole water treatment plant, because the water usually is so bad in a lot of these countries, they can't, and they also can't take a chance of poisoning. So they'll actually clean the water as it comes in, high efficient stuff, and then it goes up to like the chiller room. So a lot of times, you know, I just did a startup, and these readings, I think my TDS was down to like 150. I mean, it was super clean. And the pH is already dialed in on their stuff. Typically. Alright, so this is the end plate. You're going to see sometimes there's a hose bib attachment, sometimes there's not. If there's not, put one in. Obviously, you know, shut the chiller down, isolate it. The water side, lock it out, drain it down, and then go ahead and pull that end cap. And then that's actually what your strainers are going to look like. The old ones had a rubber O-ring right here. The new ones, that's actually a stainless steel ring right there. And they attach those strainers, with a carabiner right here from one to the next. Okay, they only use one stainless steel carabiner. If you're gonna be doing one of these, take a few extra with you, because they're kind of a pain in the butt just to get one. So I usually try to do 2, and then that's enough room for you to get in there and actually attach them pretty quick.
So no more O-rings?
Nope,
So then they scrape the barnacles off and put them back in?
pretty much. Should be clean water though, right?
So if you order new strainers, will the new strainers come without the O-rings then? Those fit in the old tubes?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's the same size header.
Cool.
So, and another thing that we're
When
talking
did
about
they change
this-
to the O-rings, or to the,
I'm
stainless
not
steel?
sure, I'm not sure what
What's
year
the
they did.
stainless, is it a snap ring or is it just fixed?
No, it's welded, it's
Whoa.
fixed.
And does it touch the outside walls?
No, there's a little bit of play in there. There's a little bit of play. So talk,
It's not bypassing water?
no, I thought the same thing, but yeah, all the mud just kind of sits at the bottom. It's kind of, I thought the same thing, like, we gotta be bypassing somehow, but it doesn't.
On your carabiner comment, that you're saying a carabiner's linking from one of those strainers to the next?
Yep.
And then why would you do 2?
Just so you can get your hand in there and actually attach it, because just one carabiner, these plates are so close together with just one, that it's kind of hard to get your hand up in there and actually reattach
Oh,
it.
you mean lengthwise? I
Yeah.
was thinking one on each side. or
No,
something.
no.
Yeah, okay.
No, just
I
put
got
2
you.
together, that way it gives you a little more length,
Yeah,
and then you can get your hand in there a lot easier.
yeah, makes sense.
Yeah. And whatever you do, if you ever see a machine that's not level, and you actually see where the machine has been buckled when they've installed it, you're probably not gonna get these out. So I had one, we went to do a startup, and they didn't level the machine, and they left with the crane, and the government already signed off on it, unfortunately. We couldn't get these out.
so you gotta take each one off?
I don't know how they decided to do it, but it was like, well, guys, sorry, I can't get these out, and you don't have a crane here. I can't just level this machine with hand tools. So they try back flushing it all the time. That's the last I heard. Yeah. Yeah, not.
You need changes on the books.
Yeah, you can't get them out. If you start seeing where the modules are literally doing this, when you're looking at them, they force these headers together, and you're not gonna be able to get those out. This is if you got glycol, something that you guys could probably talk to a chemical contractor. I know when I worked here, I never heard this before. It's in Dow's books. Anything less than 30% glycol, there's actually a bacteria that will grow and it will feed off the glycol. And anything, when you hit about 25%, it's in a relationship where the bacteria cannot thrive, they cannot eat, they will die. So there's a chart, anything like 0 to 25%, if it's in that range, there's a high percentage that you can actually get a bacteria growing. So Multistack recommends if you're gonna use glycol, it needs to be at 30%. That way it gives you a little bit of a cushion over that 25% range. And that's actually the slime from it.
That's what all
So-
the MRI machine said.
So do you have to change your freeze set point on that, so it won't trip on low pressure?
You can actually go in and change the programming for,
So it knows it's
it'll
right.
change the set points, yeah, automatically.
Is that like for the sugar-based glycol? Is that the one you're talking, or any of them?
I was told pretty much any of them, but I would talk to Ed, because I never heard that before. I know the last couple years when I was working here,
On chemistry that, I know that I had a problem at a site where it was an open chiller, and so, you had to use a different type of chemical, it was more of a clay base. And, before you'd always say, oh, you just add a little more to get the pH up, well, this one you don't. And as soon as it hit that crossover point, I was plugging filters up in a week, and I couldn't figure out why the hell, and it was, because it was, the glycol had gone bad, and the inhibitor was basically plugging it.
I think it was when I was dealing with Muckleshoot, the boilers out there. They used Dow glycol, and it's stuff neon green. I'd never seen it before at that time, and I started reading up on it. And Dow's on their chemical stuff, they talk about, like, I wanna say 30%. So, I started digging into it, it was that bacteria. And for what you guys buy from Ed, you know, I mean, you guys can always talk to him about it, see if he knows anything about it, or maybe they got a special inhibitor in theirs that, you don't need to do that, but I know all of our factory literature pretty much says 30%.
So is there like a bunch of heat transfer, like reducing the tonnage of the machine with 30% glycol?
And so typically if the customer's wanting that, typically the machine will be designed for it. And so I think the most I've ever seen so far is 50%.
Jesus.
Yeah. Yeah, that was Moscow. But you don't know what the customer's requirements are, you know. Some of them just, I've been in some places where it'll never get that low of ambient to freeze, but they do it as just a safety precaution. The machine, they don't want to take a chance. Something going sideways, and then freezing the machine. Okay. So I don't know if you guys have seen the cleaning kit. You can clean these heat exchangers. A lot of the machines, those heat exchangers aren't in the best spot to be doing this. So you really got to make sure that the chemical guys or girls are maintaining the chemicals. And Todd, have you ever had to do one of these yet?
We got one.
You have one, but have you had to actually do it?
Oh, yeah.
It's a pain in the ass?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I figured. I haven't had to do it yet myself.
Yeah, they're a real treat.
Yeah, a lot of these are not where you can access them. So now luckily Grayson's small enough that you're gonna probably bring Grayson down there and force him in there. You're gonna attach this. There's this is the whole kit. So you're gonna have that drum, you're gonna put solution in there. You're gonna attach it here, you're gonna attach it here, you're gonna cycle the solution through it. And there's two different nozzles, right? You put the first one in that does like the first section of plates.
Yeah, each one of those
Inch and a half section.
Yeah, inch and a half. Each one of these, you drop it out every time you go all the way in and push it. And this is like a collet. So these expand and that forces water down through the plates. It goes in here and out the return hose back into the tank.
Depends on which machine. Yeah.
Oh, it takes about, what, man?
I think they want 15 minutes per section.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we just use Ridline. They want you to use acid, but we weren't gonna use acid. We just use Ridline.
Yeah, it's just some of the machines where they put those, they're just difficult to get to. So you'd probably spend more time trying to set it up than you'd actually do doing the actual cleaning procedure.
You're pulling the whole.
So, and this one kind of shows it. Can we kill a couple of those lights? Here's my, a little bit better.
That one that says east over there.
Ah, there we go. So on this machine here, this is an older machine with train compressors. So this is a water-cooled unit. You'll either see the heat exchanger on the inside, and you'll see the headers on the outside, or you'll see the headers in the middle, and you'll see the heat exchanger on the outside. And you can only imagine if the heat exchanger was in here, and the pipes are out here, trying to actually get to it.
I believe Children's, they had a huge problem. They had to actually remove all the pipes. You know, take the pipes off and then do the cleaning. And it's just
That's what we did at Blanchard Father.
They don't have like 90 adapters fit in those smaller.
Just the access, the
You
room.
can't
getting in
because
there.
you gotta push the rod through straight, man.
That too. And so this machine is just the typical machine. The one with the heat exchanger on the outside, they call a total access machine because it's easier to work on. Yeah.
just get rid of them, put tube and shell in there.
All right, that's what they say you should clean with. All right, and obviously coil cleaning. I don't think we have to get into this too much. Just make sure the stuff's clean. Make sure you take these hail screens off. And this, I don't think you guys need it. It's just a quick how to replace some of the parts. Okay, fan hubs. I can get you all this literature too if you guys need it, but I think you guys can do it on your own. crankcase heater replacement, sensors. There should be a diagram.
Yeah, it's the sensors and the heaters and the, everything seems to fail on those things.
Yeah.
And that's fan motors.
Yep.
You know, transducers.
Yeah. So the sensors, a lot of people think they're different. They're just 10K ohm. They're all the same. They come with different lead lengths. That's it.
Type 3,
What's that?
type 2, type 3.
I'm not sure which one of the types they're using. But literally, I just carry the longest leads with me, and they work for any of the sensors I need on the machine. So if you're going to be ordering spares up for the customer, just order the longest ones and just cut them as you need them. And just to give an example, like the suction one, if it's a tandem machine, it's mounted in between the two compressors. It's mounted, it's going to be on the back side of the pipe towards the bottom, probably like a 4 o'clock position. It's going to be mounted inside a small piece of copper that's brazed on the pipe. For some reason, a lot of guys think that the sensor's physically brazed to the pipe and you can't change it. That's not true. You just pull real hard and it'll come right out. Okay, and that's another thing that happens all the time, and it seems like it happens on the entering chilled water temp and the leaving one. They put so much paste compound from the factory, just hydraulic action pushes them back out, so you get faulty readings all the time. Okay, so when you're doing your maintenance, a good thing to do is just shut everything off, let everything kind of equalize through the whole machine, and then just check all the temperature readings real quick. If you get one that's off, go look at it real fast. I'd probably say I have one on every startup that happens. It's pushed out. Okay, let's see your transducers. There's going to be a couple different designs that they use. So when you're talking with the factory, make sure you take a photo of it. Make sure you get them all the info that you possibly can. Typically, there's supposed to be a Schrader under them, but a lot of times that there's not. So, yeah, do that at your own risk. It's pretty easy to recover the refrigerant pretty fast. And the high pressure manual safety, it will never or should never have a Schrader under it. Okay?
These don't have, they don't have the pump down, obviously, and they don't have any valving.
No valving. Not unless there's been a repair done on it, typically. And I know that their theory was that you hurt performance. That's why they didn't want to put the valves in. That with it being modular, that it should be pretty easy to recover the refrigerant. It's not like a centrifugal where you got 1,000 pounds or something of refrigerant in there.
Small section.
Yeah, because I mean most of the machines like the 60s, you're talking like 100 pounds of refrigerant, unless there's like a low ambient kit on them, and then I think it'll go to about, I think it's like 300 or something. You can still recover that pretty quick.
A day.
What's that? You should be able to recover fairly quick.
I would just snip the wire and put it on a different access port. Call it good.
If you like a bunch of shit all over your machine, Andy, you go ahead.
Customers are cheap.
The customer or you?
Customer, it's Common General. They don't want to spend 8 hours.
Typically, there's 2 different phase monitors that they use. Hopefully there'll be a photo in here. They use this motor saver one. Typically, that's the one if they're doing like a fail to run mode, and they'll put that in every single module. And then the other one's the black ICM digital one that I'm sure you guys are used to. Typically, if it's not a fail to run mode, you'll just see that in the J boxes. If there's 1 or 2 J boxes for the machine, that's where you'll find them. Circuit breakers, I think you guys can change that. Transformer. Here's a typical differential pressure switch. Okay, They're located on the floor of the pump cabinet. Now, if there's transducers on the machine, it's going to look just like that as well. And these things are a notorious problem. There is an adjustment screw on them. It's on the outside.
So are they ever gonna go to the IFMs, flow sensors, instead of using those switches that plug up and
Are you talking like the
differential
Thermal
switch?
dispersion.
no, they're not on those. Yeah. So like if you go with a variable flow and you actually have one put on the module itself by the evaporator, it's like an add-on. So I think I've only seen one job site that's done that, unfortunately. You know, another thing I'll warn you guys about, if the customer buys a machine, it's actually on the schematics that the flow switch is supposed to be added by the contractor, right? They don't sell it with the chiller, which I've already kind of gone rounds with them about that. I know overseas they've already said they're going to change just because of what's happened overseas. The memo came out, they're not allowed to do that anymore. But domestically, that's a whole nother department. They get treated completely different than us. So that's probably going to happen. So if you come out, you know, McKinstry's installed it, or hey, maybe you guys are installing one, just a heads up. And I don't recommend just using those differential pressure switches for a flow switch. Yeah, they suck. And you could freeze the chiller up.
Carrier doesn't come with them either.
So,
I didn't think York come with them anymore either. I think everybody went away from them.
Yeah, I know what IFMs.
Well, no, there's no flow.
now it's an add-on.
Yeah, they are. On the on the Chilmore side?
On
it
a
is.
small one, down on centrifugal,
Yeah, you're right.
because they use it.
What are they using now? They're just still using paddle switches?
Correct.
What's that?
So you using paddle switches still, or I mean, what are they going to now?
The factory just puts it on the contractor. That's your responsibility to install it if you want it.
What about the newer stuff?
On the McQuays, they all have them.
Paddle switches?
Carrier centrifugals don't have any. They're just,
The
they just
screws-
use, they have a thermistor in the belly of the evaporator, and
Oh,
that's
that's
it.
they can measure different temperature.
No, they're just watching the temperature of the belly. They're just reading the refrigerant temperature in the belly of the barrel, and that's all they use.
But the screws do. 30
Some, yeah,
HXCs.
the screws will have them.
Yeah.
They're IFM factors.
Yeah, if there's not one on the machine, it's just cheap insurance. Just put it on the machine. Talk them into it. Just get it done.
So you're not required to have them like the climate cools, proprietary ones?
No, they literally, if you read the schematic, it's up. It's their responsibility.
Covering their ass.
Yeah.
Option.
So what had happened was on my job site that froze up, the contractor decided to start it themselves. They actually don't have anybody that's actually mechanical on that job site. They decided to go up. You know, we've been around Multistack before. They literally, they had to wire in those pressure switches themselves to act as a flow switch, or they had to put a jumper in. I'm not sure. I wasn't the one that showed up on the initial service call. But as it started tripping on low leaving water temp, they just kept going up and resetting it. They froze one up, they kept doing it, froze another one up, kept doing it. Next thing you know, they got 4 out of 9 modules that are froze up.
Yeah, let's get hotter.
The bad thing is they only had enough capacity, they only needed to run 2 modules at the time, you know? Brand new machine, we had to put all new heat exchangers in it for them, new compressors, and yeah, it was an expensive repair for them. And then, you know, on top of that, you're having to explain what happened. So on something like that, you know, everybody from DC flew out, wanting to know what was going on. And it was all over a flow switch. All right, so system faults. These are some of the, and you guys should have, or it's out on the printer still. Somebody wants to run out and grab them.
Not me.
All right, so these faults, these are typical faults that you're gonna see like on the ASP, which is, ASP is the air-cooled unit. So your EX1, typically, you know, it's something that's gonna require a reset of the master controller. Typically that's jumped out. Your remote start-stop, your power phase module, wanna hand those out?
Those are all the faults?
No, there's also a troubleshooting guide too. It's also gonna be a troubleshooting guide. I didn't know if you guys wanted to take notes real quick or whatever.
You got this on a thumb drive?
Oh, I do.
He's got my thumb drive sitting right up there, I'll just wait for you to download it.
There you go. Well, you don't have to pass them out if you don't want.
You get paid for it.
Yeah, there you go.
You get there?
Can you staple those for everybody too? And maybe a nice little binder.
Ah, that's good, Travis.
How many pages is?
These are employees.
It's gonna be a few. It's gonna be a few. All right. So, anyways, system faults, just as an example.
Ran out of paper.
All right.
Still
But
waiting for it to reload.
there's gonna be this flow chart here. Okay. Now this flow chart is a little bit older. And there's gonna be one thing that you guys are gonna wanna make a note on. And it's not this, that actually needs to be moved to the next page. If unit has a motorized valve on the evaporator, please reference the circuit fault Word document, which is at the very end. That saying actually needs to be on this page.
Can you put a note in there for us, Seth?
Yeah. I'll get right on that, man.
I haven't had a chance to hop in and change that real quick, so. This is pretty good. I've been able to send it to guys and just say, hey, you're having problems, follow this. If you got any more problems, give me a call back. And usually they'll hit me up and say, okay, well, we need this part. This will walk them right through the issue typically. And circuit fault, I mean, it could be something as that Belimo valve on the evaporator, if it's got one, if it's not clocked right, the micro switches internally, I've had to reclock those. I've actually had to take the micro switches. Yeah, they're set at the factory, but I've had a few of them that are just slightly off. I've had to loosen them up and change them, put them back together. Not a big deal, except for trying to actually fit in the machine and do it.
Does anybody actually want one of these?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm gonna
I
tell
do,
you.
but I don't want it in paper form.
Yeah, that's what I'm
I
asking.
do.
Yeah, if I email it to Todd, he loses it every time.
Yeah, I need it in paper.
God, you got one of those little thimbles like
All right, pretty easy stuff, but this is a great tool to have.
Page 18.
Okay,
What page numbers did we need to transpose that note on?
it's going to be from the low pressure fault on the Pico 2. Yeah, to 76 to 77. Okay. You might not want to go with that, Travis, because this is all one PowerPoint, so those pages are going to be off. I'd just go by the top here, this low pressure fault here. It's probably like, I think, page 10 or 12, somewhere in there.
Is that just one? No.
Oh. Desktop page,
All right.
Oh.
There's also the temperature sensor resistance chart. That's in there. There's also a transducer one in there if you guys need that.
You got
For troubleshooting those.
Then this goes to your troubleshooting guide.
Okay.
So that's
There's a Word document at the end that kind of talks more about that circuit fault, because there are a few things that could cause it.
Did you get one?
Yeah.
Thank you. I don't know if you got the whole thing.
And there's some You guys want to take a quick break?
Yeah, what's the first page of this thing?
I just start with faults.
Yeah. You guys just want to take a quick
I go
break real
faults
quick?
to the next fault.
Yeah.
Sure.
I'm just gonna go through this real quick, some of the stuff that we've seen, and it kind of helps bring up some stuff. A lot of times it's equipment damage. Believe it or not, Yeah, our machines do get transported like that. One of them got damaged. I heard a story about it. It was on the back of an elephant, and it got crushed. Even though like some of these jobs are like literally one of the embassies is $1 billion project. They didn't buy a spreader bar, and they crushed the condenser coils putting it in. Spreader bars are pretty cheap. This one here, this was a job that Todd and I had actually, not this photo, but the contractor that installed it didn't hook the bypass up. So they kept thinking that the chiller was undersized, it wasn't working. And it was all because the bypass wasn't working. It was just bypassing and coming right back to the machine, so the machine never staged up. And that was a heat pump. So nobody really discovered it until we went down there in the dead of winter on a cold snap. Garbage in the strainer. Obviously, this kind of brings up, you know, tube and shell, 5/8 holes, but yet ours has got 2 millimeter passages. That's a ballpoint pen right there. Huge difference.
Oh, so that's how that cleaning thing, you just shove it through to each.
Yeah, you actually have to shove it in on the water side, right? And then it forces the water through these plates.
And then the pipe has graduations on it so you can see where you are.
Yeah, it's just like a plate and frame heat exchanger, except these are brazed shut, so you can't open them up. And if you can't clean it with that machine, it's garbage, and you got to buy another one. There's a machine down south that I helped troubleshoot over the phone, and it turns out it's only, I think, 7 years old, and the heat exchanger's already shot. They never did the water treatment on it.
UPSD?
No, Cowlitz PUD down Longview. One of you guys' competitors down there. I tried to help you out, saying, you know, you should really call McDonald Miller.
You guys have, if you guys get any of those heat exchangers that are bad, we can order them through MCS too, for about half the cost as Multistack. Same exact heat exchanger.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much Multistack right now is buying their parts. The only thing that they're really built is the frame. And of course the piping and stuff is the coils, the condenser coils. And then they just purchased within the last few months a manufacturer that's doing heat exchangers. So typically you guys are probably going to be able to find anything without going through CMS. You know, loose connections, that's huge. Water quality, once again, okay. That's on a job. Mud. I had a job that I flew down, and it was like 3 months after I left, and it already looked like that. And that was the one where they couldn't pull the strainers out. They didn't level the machine. That one they used a food grade glycol, and that's what caused all that mud on that one.
Or all your condensers, don't they have to be closed loops?
You can eat it, right?
Typically.
They don't?
No, show me.
No.
She sounds like a nightmare.
It is.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
Typically.
That's what you have to deal with.
Yep. So, food grade, yeah. And this is that, just that slime, basically, that bacteria from low glycol level, once again. This is actually that chart that we talked about.
Yeah, that was.
Concentration of glycol. You guys will see from 0 to 10, your percentage of chance of getting it is almost basically 100%. From 10 to 20, it's down to 50. You get to 20 to 25, you get down to 10%. And above 25, you got 0% chance of getting it. I've never heard that until shortly before I left here.
Propylene.
Yeah,
It was a
but
job that we spent months back flushing, and then Kimtech had the glycol. but they wanted their contractor to install the inhibitor, and they never did the inhibitor. A year later, whole thing was mud again.
Yeah, because the stuff, the glycol that we buy from Chemtech has inhibitor in it.
Yeah. But this is even Dow has inhibitor in it, and this is coming from them. So it's just a warning.
Okay.
You know, if you're using something other than Dow, hey, commercial Chemtech.
I do recall Ed, one of his guys told me that exact same thing.
You know.
Otherwise you'll have bacterial growth.
You know, and it's one of those things where if they say no, maybe just get it in an email. That way you have it in writing and saying no or yay or whatever. You know. All right. Obviously, you want to pre-test the water site or the site water before you're going to add the glycol. Okay. Make sure that all the pipes are clean with detergent. Everything's flushed before you're actually going to connect the chiller. Use pre-mixed heat transfer fluid in areas where the water supply doesn't meet multi-stack standards. Here in Seattle, it's pretty good. I can imagine maybe if you're in Eastern Washington or something, you might have to actually get water that's been purified before putting it in. A lot of these comments, you know, the water's dirty around the world, so this is just there to cover them. All right. This is stuff I'm sure you guys have all heard before. Heat transfer fluids are not specifically formulated for chilled water systems. Don't use them. Car stuff. Heat transferred fluids at less than 30% concentration. Use of automotive antifreeze. Connecting the chiller and adding glycol before the piping system is thoroughly cleaned with detergent and flushed. And it happens all the time. And using water that doesn't meet the standard. Deferred maintenance. I'm just going to go through this stuff. You guys have seen that. Cleaning coils. Electrical connections. Here you can see where everything's starting to get hot on these drives. You guys already have your own maintenance program. Okay. So a lot of times, you know, we've flown out on service calls where literally the service call is just too many people playing with it, and they start adjusting the machine. You guys can always get the startup report. If hey, you're taking the job over from McKinstry or something, you want to actually see what one of us startup technicians have actually programmed it as. Maybe things are all over the place. The factory will email you the report, and all of our set points will be right there on it. Okay.
Who does somebody email for that? They email you?
No, just talk to the factory. So basically the factory, they're so small there that the same phone number I'm going to call for service support is going to be the same people you would call. The same phone number. And they don't have like one for the service techs or a service hotline. It's just one phone number for Multistack. Tell them you want to talk to somebody in troubleshooting, and they'll, hey, whether it's controls or whether it's the machine itself, and they'll find somebody. Okay. All right, so this is what you're going to see on a typical ASP unit. You're going to see capacity, and that's actually what the machine's currently running at, how many compressors, and you're going to see demand percentage. This is what the controller actually wants to run at currently. Okay, so you could have this say, let's say 50%. This could be at 75 because maybe the return water temp has come down, so the demand has dropped. Okay, so you're going to see those numbers going back and forth as the machine's running. Here's your entering chilled water temp, and here's your leaving chilled water temp. And this is actually the ones that are for the machine itself, not a module. You're going to have your delay, and you're going to have faults. How many faults there are on the machine. Okay, if you see an alarm, you'll see it come up, what type of alarm there is. You can also see it on that fault screen. Depends on what position the controller is actually in at that time. should have more photos. Sorry guys, I was gonna delete a lot of this stuff today. I got wrapped up with something. How many of you guys have actually seen one of these? Okay. Do you guys understand? I'm just gonna get into it right now. The upper, lower, and VSP set points.
Nope.
We'll probably talk about this a couple times tonight. So on the ASP, there's an upper set point, upper, lower, and a VSP. VSP, variable set point. Typically, what you're going to do, you're going to set the lower, you're going to figure out the delta T of the machine, if it's 10, 12, whatever. Typically, the lower is always 45 Fahrenheit. Let's say it's got a 10-degree delta T, we're going to set this at 55, right? We're not going to adjust this. This is what we're going to adjust when you want to change the water temp leaving the machine. And typically, it's 50%, okay? So if we have 5 modules, it's 10 compressors. And this is in the manual, the Pico 3 manual, so if you forget it, it's not a big deal. You can pull it up pretty easy. This is your compressors here. So if this is at 50%, we're going to be right here. 50% would be 50 degrees, okay? So what you want to do is just take a line here. This is going to be your return chilled water temp here. Theoretically, what you're seeing coming in. And then this is what you're going to be leaving. So, when you look at this, nice. Alright, so we got our 45 degrees, 50, 55 degrees. We got our percentage here for the VSP. And this usually takes a little bit to grasp. So, at 50%, if we start our 50%, 50 degrees, right?
Is that 50% demand?
No, it's a variable set point. So yeah, it'll be kind of a demand thing. So at 50, you're pretty much happy. Everything's shut off. As you start bringing warmer water back, you're going to start staging compressors on. So your leaving water temp is going to start dropping. So now you're at 100% here, load, and guess what? You have your 10-degree delta T. Okay? So, if you want it colder, don't ever bring this below 35. Below 35, you're going to start having problems. But we'll use 25 just to kind of show you the dramatic of it. So, the difference would be see what you're doing? You're bringing them on quicker by lowering this. Return temp is dropped down, and you're bringing the compressors on quicker, but your end result is still the same. It's still 45 degree water.
So that's how you, so if you have 8 modules, now that VSP set point is only on the master module, right?
Yep.
So you could speed up and slow down your response time by the VSP then.
Yeah, so if we wanted to slow this down, maybe you're trying to save energy, maybe the customer doesn't really need, you know, like a fast ramp, right? Even as fast as this, come up here. you set it here. Let's say we set it at 75, just to kind of give a dramatic effect here. See what you just did? So when the first few compressors are kicked on, your leaving water temp is actually even warmer.
Okay.
So let's say you had BAS hooked up to it. This is what you'd want to reset right here.
So to change your set point, you need to lower the LWR.
Nope.
No,
These two pretty much always stay.
just your VSP.
Yeah. These
Percentage.
Isn't the end result always the
Always
LWR?
45. Yeah. See, and the thing is typically you don't ever want to be below 45 on this set point. There's some safeties that are on these machines, and you start dropping this lower, and you're going to be real close to those safeties. And then if you start having where, hey, maybe they're not keeping up with their water treatment, now you're going to be even closer. And you might start having nuisances. So.
So do you normally run them at 50?
Depends on the building. So I'll usually start there. That's the starting point, and I'll kind of start playing with it a little bit. But yeah, don't ever go below 35 though. We'll just start having nothing but problems. That's what I was told.
All the ones I've seen, Keith, they're, at least around here, are all set at 70.
Well, I need to change mine then. 'Cause it bangs on and off all goddamn day long.
Well, there's other things you can do too.
No, I know. That's where I'm gonna start though. I think I didn't know it was like that.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Well, like I said, if you guys forget this, it's right in the manual for the Pico 3 control.
Now, how does the BAS, because like, Tacoma General, they had issues where they kept tripping on low chilled water, because it's a 3 module, but yet the first stage, for whatever reason, always had a higher delta T.
Okay.
And so I told them this only happens during light load conditions, so I told them put a reset in there. So now they're resetting it based on ambient temperature, and it resets the temperature, not the VSP.
Yeah, it doesn't need to do that. They can just reset the VSP and be done with it.
Well, we're trying to get away from supplying 45 degree, because that's just.
But on light load, if you reset the VSP, you'd actually bring this up, and the compressors wouldn't come on as soon. So your return temp would actually be warmer, right? So therefore your output until
It'd still try to reach 45 though, right?
Once it started.
Once it starts, it's gonna still try to reach.
Oh. Because think about it, if you have like right here, let's just pick a number. You have let me rewrite this real quick. Let's get rid of this.
Well, yeah, as your return goes down, then your compressor's gonna start staging off because
Exactly.
it's not calling for as much demand.
Let's just pick this. So if they were at 50% low load conditions and they weren't resetting it, and they're tripping off, right? How many compressors are they running? They're not running them all at once, are they, or
No.
just a couple? So let's just say.
Whatever demand is.
Let's just say 2 are on, right? So 2 are on, we're probably actually only putting out like 52 degree water right here, right?
Well, okay, you're mistaken though. You're putting out 52 on the main header,
And is it
but on that one heat exchanger,
well, is it a variable flow machine or
no,
is
it's not.
so it's constant?
It's a constant flow.
Yep.
So where it's going through the one single heat exchanger could be 52,
It might be coming out 45.
right?
Okay, out of the machine. So the machine's hitting 45, right? But if we come up here and we set this VSP higher, look, the return temp is even warmer, right, than this one by a few degrees. that should get you by. I mean, what's the delta T on it? See the difference? That's the return temp, but then also see the difference on your leaving. And that's gonna be the same with the machine. I mean, that evaporator.
But that means they would have to be physically communicating with the, yeah,
Well, they have to be if they're
Then
giving.
how are they
they're
resetting
just
this
sending
then?
a 4 to 20 milliamp signal. A reset, a 4 to 20 milliamp reset signal, so that,
Oh, so they're not actually doing like a web-based thing?
no, they are not.
Yeah, I think you can only do, I'm not sure if you can do that on that 4 to 20, if you can,
Yeah,
if you can actually talk to it this way.
No. That's-
But, what's the delta T on just that module? Is it like 2 degrees difference, or is it, we're talking 5?
Oh, when just one compressor, you got like 7 degrees.
And then when the second one kicks on,
You have like 12 degrees.
and then all the other ones are just like 10?
Yeah.
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 So what you could theoretically do would be take this guy here and put it up to 57.
Well, that's why I just told them just put a reset, cause
Yeah,
now I'm calling for, instead of calling for 45, I'm calling for 52 supply water when it's 58 outside.
Yeah, but like if you take a service call and you just don't have that capability at that time, that's where you could start adjusting those.
Right. Right.
They could do a reset. So typically when I do a startup, I'll run, typically I don't have a load for the whole machine, I'll run all the modules, I'll try to run as many as I can together, I'll take an average, and then that's where I set this. So 45 is my lowest, and then I set this to that delta T, and then I'll start playing with this VSP to get a water temp that they're gonna be happy with leaving the machine.
Now, there's a delay I noticed on that screen. Is that delay looking at this and looking at the water temperatures? Is that bringing on your compressors, or does that have anything to do with this?
No, it's programmable, you can program it.
Right.
But
Okay.
on, at least on this one building, it doesn't get enable, when it has a demand, sometimes it already has it's at 100% at the chiller itself. The demand for the chiller, and that time delay will be like 5 seconds for the first state, for the first time it's enabled. And then it starts going back to the 90 seconds or whatever time delay, but how do you correct that?
So that's actually part of the whole
Part of
software?
the VSP part of it, or?
No, so that's actually in the, I wanna say it's called TDIF.
I know you can program whatever you want there.
Yep.
But just on that first, when it's first enabled, it's just all the compressors just bam, 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 coming right on with a 5-second delay between each one.
Yeah, it shouldn't do that. So what should happen is typically the first one will come on because, hey, it's been off, and the master knows, hey, it's been off. So all of a sudden you have, let's say you just turn the machine on, right? It knows. Typically you'll see it'll count down to either 90, or it'll say, you know what, I'm satisfied with 5 seconds, let's just bring one compressor on. Typically, once that one comes on, that's where this comes into play.
I've seen it, at least half of them come on 5 seconds. It finally goes to that 90 seconds, but it's not.
It's not
the first
immediate.
few, yeah.
See, that's not right. So either one, the software, it's an older software and they've probably updated
Just been
it.
updated.
Ah, well,
Trying to redo it.
just because it's a new software doesn't mean it's great.
I'd say it did it on the last version too.
Yeah.
And it did. It's just been updated a couple months ago. And it's,
Yeah, it shouldn't do that.
we changed programming in the building so we don't have that 100% demand. So we kept the water surfing through it so we don't have that instant hit, which fixes that in a different way. But
And then the other thing would be is when that software is getting put in, has a factory reset actually been done before you actually start using it? So that kind of, that got me in Todd's, because I was always told you actually do it at the slaves, like each one individually. Well, it was newer software that they were using an old way of doing it, right? It was like crisscrossed. And then they actually had us plug in the entire comm wire with the master and do the factory reset. It was supposed to do a factory reset on all of them. Because we were getting contactors coming on, and every time you'll see something different happen. So a lot of times you'll have to do a factory reset, put all the set points back in, and a lot of times you'll get issues like that, staging issue, it'll go away.
Without having to download it again or the update?
Yep. Yeah, whenever you put software in, just make sure you do the factory reset. It has to. You'll have nothing but problems.
Do it on Friday at like 2:30.
And make sure you write everything down on a piece of paper too.
Yeah.
Every one of them fucking settings,
Yeah.
because they go bye-bye.
I probably have that picture of it.
Yeah, some of them you can actually, some of them have a screen in there where it'll say save settings, and you can do it, and then you can go back in and reload the settings, but I don't even go down that road. I just write everything down real quick, go back in, reprogram it, and just be done with it.
And that's with this guy.
Yeah.
Do they ship this to you with the program in it? Is that what that deal is, or do you?
Yeah, you can actually get, they'll send it to you like that, or you can buy the whole kit, right? You'll get this as well. This will talk to your PC. You can actually plug it in. And then with the PC, you can actually have like the factory just download you the zip file. And then basically the PC will put it right onto that. And you just go right out to the machine and start installing it. So, and if you do that, just so you guys know, when you get that file, you could see a master, you could see a slave, and you can see what's called a like heat exchanger or super changer. All it is a plate and frame heat exchanger. You need to put all of that software from that file on that device. Don't just go, well, I'm only dealing with a master, I only need it. No, put the slave on there, put the heat exchanger on there, put that master on there. Otherwise that thing will lock up, believe it or not, and then it won't talk right. So you need to make sure that all of that file is on that. And then what's gonna tell that which one to actually put on there is the address number. Todd, do you want to talk about that EEV? You want to kind of explain to them that real quick?
So, the new electronic expansion valves on the new multi-stacks, they're changed out it's a Sportland valve still, but it's a different valve. And I don't know if you guys have seen the multi-stack driver board, the serial driver board for the electronic expansion valve. Have you guys seen those?
The one with all the flashing lights on it?
That's the screen for it.
Well, here's the screen. But you have to have this screen to do anything with the electronic expansion valves on these machines. So if you don't have this screen, you can't change an expansion valve. Just to let you know. You can change an expansion valve, but you can't change the driver board. So what I ended up having to do was, I called Keith and I said, hey, this driver board's bad. So I'd buy a new valve because the old valve is non-existent anymore. So I put the new valve in, put the new driver board in. Well, the driver board doesn't come programmed. So it's blank. So you get the driver board, you plug it in, and it instantly goes into alarm. And if you don't have this module, you're stuck in the mud. So every multi-stack is shipped with one of those modules. They're supposed to be, if somebody hasn't taken it out of the machine. And you can pling that to any one of the expansion valves. Mine has 8 modules on it. But as soon as you get a new driver board, you got to program in the serial driver number. You have to program in what kind of valve it is. It could be an Alco, Sportland. There's like 7 different valves. The speed of the valve, the voltage of the valve, and there's one other.
Does that have like a cut sheet that comes with the valve?
No.
No.
None of this comes with anything. That's what I'm telling you. So, and then what you do is once you get those 5 basic programs put in, you can take that module right there and go over to another driver board that's good, and you can copy the program off that driver board and download it to the new driver board.
As long as it's the same driver board.
As long as it's this, no, as long as it's this, it's the same system.
expansion though.
Yeah.
So, and it'll automatically copy that and that valve will now start working. It took me about 4 hours to figure it out. Now, I mean, once you figure it out, it's super easy. Take me probably 10 minutes to do it now. But I'm just letting you know, if you guys ever do an expansion valve on one, you have to have one of these.
And if it's got a low ambient kit, there's two. And they label them right at the factory, right on the top of the screen. This one's got EVD, the other one that I got, you'll see LAC on it, and it's the exact same screen. So you gotta be careful which one you're grabbing. And they usually have these in the unit, you'll see a little bag tied up somewhere, that's what's in them.
I've never seen one of those.
If there's a driver there, there should be one. It comes with the chiller, unless somebody's
Now,
walked away with it.
Is that just on Multistack, or is that with all Carel that has EEVs?
I don't know what the other guys do.
Can you leave it like plugged into the board, so
Yes.
that way people, that way, like if it's plugged in, nobody would think to take it off,
Typically, it'll
run away with it.
You could do that, and then typically the other ones will have like there's a blank screen that goes there, that covers it. So you'll open it up and
Yeah.
Yeah, because you take that to, when I do my maintenance, I take that around every module and just,
Yeah.
and then you can stroke the expansion. You can do it on the
Keypad.
you can do it on here too.
But to program it, you gotta have that.
But to program it, you have to have that, yeah.
yeah, and they were using Sportland was using one type of valve, okay? And even the wiring harness is completely different. The new valve is different looking slightly, the head, and then the wires are different. And then you gotta be careful on the new one. It's a 4-pin thing, but there's no clocking tab. So you can literally rotate that 4 different directions and it'll plug in.
That's nice.
Yeah, it sucks. Be careful. So this is typical what you'll see in the system variable settings, the non-factory ones. You got your upper and lower that we talked about, your VSP value, okay, your load limit. This is where, if for some reason you wanted to limit the machine, or if for some reason you didn't want it spooling up to 100%, you could actually come in here and adjust this and make it so it wasn't allowed to go to 100%, okay?
Why is the VSP value defaulted at 0?
They got some goofy defaults, they really do, that we go in and change. Like they're, like this one's not even 325 anymore. This one's like 200 for 410A, which is kind of low. So some of their defaults are kind of screwy. Okay.
Next one, you go through photos.
All right. So your your T-diff, this is what we were talking about earlier over there. This is another way to slow down your staging if it's working right. Okay. Fail indication. This is actually if you want to go in there and set it where, hey, maybe you got to get more than one alarm before it actually signaled out to the BAS to tell somebody. We had one issue where I had to do that just on a repair. I just had to figure out what percentage. We had one alarm, set it to that, and then the people back in the knock room, they weren't alarmed by it, and then if one more alarm came in, then okay, they would get up and move and start looking at it. Lead compressor, this is actually where you're gonna go in and set what you want to be the lead. So right now, this is module 1, compressor 1, and it changes at midnight. Okay, we're gonna get into, there's 4 different ways that you can set up the staging. So there'll be another screen I can get to, and we'll talk about that some more. This is how many modules you got. Okay. This is going to be your manual set point range. So these ones right here are what you're going to see typically on the slave as well. So when you switch that switch to manual, that's what it's going to control to, right there. Okay, your fan set point, this is for your head pressure control, and then your fan offset as well.
What's the offset?
So in other words, like if you got a VFD, you know, if you set that at, let's say, 250, and you put that at 50, how fast you're gonna have that fan ramp up and down.
Gotcha.
250
full
off
on.
too hard.
And then of course your high pressure cutout, there's gonna be 2 on the machine. You're gonna have the manual one with a button, and the new ones, I'm gonna warn you guys, they don't click. You don't even feel them anymore. They just, you hit them and you have to literally go look at the machine to find out if it's actually tripped or not. This one here is the transducer, so you can actually program this. A lot of times I'll program this lower than the manual one, so that way I don't have to try to crawl on the machine to reset it. I can just do it from the master. And then your sequencing. So this is going to be how you change your lead. Okay, you're going to have odd and even, or you're going to have standard. And then indexing is going to be either off or on. Typically, the indexing is always on. The sequence here, typically, if it's a variable flow machine, it's going to be standard. If it's a constant volume, it's going to be odd even, typically. Once again, this is the Pico 3 controller, so like I said, if you forget about this, it's right here in the manual, it talks about it. And I'll give you some more examples too. So just your faults, your inputs, your outputs. Some faults, system faults, you're going to do at the master. Module faults, you're going to have to clear at the module itself. And for that, you actually have to kill power at the module. And that's where you're going to want to pull your comm wire. That way you don't shut the whole machine down. And deal with it there at that level. Keep going here. Alright, so here's your indexing. Your compressor rotations. So just an example. Indexing on standard sequencing, day 1, you're going to see M1 is going to be the first one, and then M1-2. So module 1, you're going to bring your number 1 compressor on, then your number 2, then you're going to go to module 2, number 1, number 2, and you're going to go all the way down the machine like that. The next day, it's going to be module 1 still, but compressor 2 would actually be the lead. Then you would go to module 2, compressor 1, and you're gonna rotate like that through the whole machine. Okay. Now, if you and this is good for constant or for variable flow, because variable flow, you're shutting modules off, right? So if you're shutting modules off, you're going to want to make sure whatever module that has the valves open, you're going to want to make sure you're running those compressors while the machine's actually open to run on that evaporator. Okay. On this one, being constant flow, it's going to be better energy performance. This is odd even with indexing on. You're going to go all your odds, and then you're going to bring all the evens on. So what you're actually doing is you're bringing one compressor on in a module, and then you're bringing another module, you're bringing another compressor on. That way you're not intermixing your water. You're actually getting a better water temp leaving right off the bat. Okay? And that's because you're not shutting your evaporators off here, whereas here in a variable flow, you're actually got those Belimo actuators and you're actually valving off the evaporator. So you're actually taking care of that mixing problem right off the bat.
What reference that on the screen, what sequence you're in, like what day you're in or something? So you know what's supposed to come on?
It won't tell you on the screen per se what day, but if you go up to the programming and it says lead compressor, it'll actually show you there. And I want to say like the second screen in, as you're scrolling through the master, it'll actually tell you what the lead compressor is as well.
And then from there you can just use this.
Yeah, there's two ways to figure it out. Okay. Which, if you're doing maintenance, it's really helpful to go into the programming area. Let's say you're working on mod 3 and that's the lead, change it to mod 4. So that way your mod 3 is the very last one it's going to even try to call for, right? Or one of them. And then up here, this kind of shows you if you go non-indexing, which I haven't had any jobs do that. The indexing's always been on for me, but you'll see where your lead compressor non-indexing odd even, your lead compressor would always be model 1, compressor 1, unless it was actually changed in the system variables. And then your compressors would come on odd all first, and then all even first. If the lead compressor was even, then all on. So it's a little different here and a little different here. I don't have any jobs that I've set them up that way. Typically, it's the two bottom ones.
Do any of the modules come with different size compressors on
them? The air-cooled ones, no. Typically, if you got a 60-ton, you got two 30-ton compressors. But I will tell you the DHRCs, which are just basically the water-cooled chillers with no cooling tower, right? I've seen those where they will put like a 50-ton mod and like a 70-ton mod side by side, and you don't really notice it right away. You better look at the nameplate, or you'll see where the compressors all of a sudden are bigger.
That's the only reason I can think of you'd want the non-indexing, because if you had small compressors, you want them to be your leads.
True. That's a good point. But I know on the DHRCs they do that.
Carriers do, yeah, on their air-cooled chillers, they'll have different size compressors in there, and then you can set one to lead, so you don't run into cycling problems.
Yeah, I haven't seen any of the air-cooled ones like that yet, but I do know with the DHRCs they will set them up like that, where they'll have a smaller skid and then a bigger skid, and they're all bolted up together. And then there's free cool modules too, and that's a whole nother Pico controller. It's like called the X0S. I think Todd's has got a reversing valve, just so you guys know about. I might have a photo of it, but they're actually rebuildable in place. So just so you guys know about it. It's not like
good luck getting to it. But
yeah,
they're
it's
rebuildable in place.
It's gonna be like Grayson or Ed. I hate to say it, guys, but me and Todd looked at it.
No way I'm getting in there to do it. I'll tell you that. Ain't gonna happen.
It's tight. I've only worked on one other, and I was able to get to that one just because there wasn't a coil on the backside, so I could take the sheet metal off and get right to it. But you can actually rebuild those on place, so you don't have to actually unsweat them and take them out.
Andy, did you ever check that one at Tacoma? Remember I said it was leaking? It had that white crap coming out of that plug? Or did you have Steve look at it?
I don't even remember which one you're talking about. Sorry.
He's building a house right now.
I don't remember. Was it up on the roof?
No, not roof hell.
Oh, yeah, group health. Yeah. That little air stack up on the roof.
It was leaking right out of that plug out of the
Dryer.
core shell.
No, I did not look at it.
Curious on what that crap was.
It's only a twice-a-year maintenance, so.
All right, DHRC, just real quick. I don't know if you guys have seen these at all. It's basically just a water-cooled chiller with no cooling tower. And you're just gonna have a heat loop like VAVs or domestic water or both that you're trying to heat. It's pretty much what you're gonna see right there. These are the bigger ones. Okay. Once again, like this one, you see that you got the headers here, you got a set here, and the heat exchangers are right in the middle. So kind of good luck getting in there and cleaning them without tearing everything apart. Something to keep in mind on these sensors here, there's color coding, okay? And it's on the schematic as well. So the water temp sensors have a heat shrink that's color coded right on there. Makes it a little easier to troubleshoot. And then here's that piece of pipe I was talking about where they slide in. Right, and you can see even in this photo, there's another one right there.
Said use heat paste in that thing, right?
They do, and they put a lot in there. And they'll literally, they put so much in there, it kind of just hydraulically starts walking back out. So I know at the factory, they'll try to use like zip ties to try to get it, but the way they loop it, it still tends to start walking back out partially. I would think probably silicone would probably be a better option. A couple dabs of silicone.
Refracted, right?
Do they send heat paste with it?
No.
Okay.
They put enough on there that
You don't need to put more on when
you'll be wearing it, don't worry. All right, a set of valves, Bolinos. All right, and you can get, I mean, there's a lot of different power options which you can get. All right. Alright, so the DHRC controller, it's going to be just a little bit different when you're actually looking at it. So the controller itself, the master, is going to be just like the ASP master. It's identical. But when you actually start looking at the program, it's going to look a little different, okay? You're still going to have an up arrow, down, enter alarm, all that. It's going to be a little bit longer, not a big issue. However, when you start going through the menus, they are slightly different, but they're very similar. So on the ASP and the DHRC, you're going to have this. This is where you can actually go in and turn the chiller on or off right there by selecting that. Okay. Status is going to be typical your basic set points that we were talking about earlier. Or I mean, status is going to give you your readings of what's going on. System variables is the settings. And then your fault review, your load profile that we talked about. And if you want to lock this out from the customer, that's where you're going to do it. Okay. So that's what that looks like minus this scrambled stuff. Okay. Chiller off, push enter to start, be patient. If it doesn't work, hit the key again, and you should see it change. It'll count down 30 seconds. Status on the ASP is going to look different than the DHRC. Here you're going to see capacity, demand. You're going to see your hot water side, your chilled water side, your faults, your delay, your cooling mode. This is what it's controlling to right now. And I'll tell you guys, you can program it to heating or cooling or auto. There's a couple other ones. You're always going to want to set them to auto. Okay. How the DHRC actually controls is by the lowest load on the machine. So let's just say you program it to heating, right? And you force it into the heating mode, and your chilled water side has actually got the lowest demand. You're actually going to overdrive the machine and have nothing but issues. It's going to start tripping out. I'm not even sure why they give that option. It should just be auto. But you will see this thing switch back and forth between heating and cooling on its own.
That's pretty cool.
Okay. So heating demand right now, it's showing you on this screen, heating demand is 0%, the cooling demand is 0%. Okay. And it's at 0 and 0, and it just happens to be sitting in the cooling mode. It's probably the last mode it was in. Okay, load limit, just like you had before. You got the offsets you could do. You got your outputs as well. You're going to see module 1A status is going to be the first one. As you keep scrolling down, it'll show Like this one says compressors on. It'll show you your hours. It'll show you your pressures. PR is pressure ratio. Okay, and on the heat pump one,
That's how it tells it when to go into frost.
yeah,
And
and they
the
are.
pressure ratio of your compressor.
And I will tell you that if you read up on this, it's lacking on what they're actually doing at the factory. The manuals say that it cuts out on the safety at a certain point. And Copeland originally had verified that that was the setting they wanted. They started losing compressors and they started realizing this pressure ratio was set way too high. So they've actually started going in and redoing the software to actually kill that at a faster rate. To try to save those compressors. Superheat. Just so you guys know, heads up on alarm status, when you actually go in there and you're looking at the readings, if it says superheat, it'll give you a false reading. So when you're looking at, hey, what was the machine doing when it actually was running and it went into alarm, it'll give you a superheat reading, just ignore it. Only pay attention to this if the machine's actually running. And typically, it should be right around 12 degrees.
So this is on like a water-to-water heat recovery chiller?
Yep. But you're gonna see pressure ratio, superheat. You're gonna see all of this on the air
They go
cooled as
into a
well.
defrost,
Todd's got a heat pump.
Or flow,
but it's water-to-water?
water
No.
to air.
Oh,
So what we're kind of doing is, I'm trying to kind of give you guys a kind of an overview of, you guys have heat recovery units you work on, you got the air cooled ones you work on, and then you got Todd's heat pump that's air cooled.
so does this thing do a seasonal changeover?
No, strictly used for heating. Just in the winter time.
So
It's a dandy, let me tell you.
so
Lived out there for about 3 months. Yeah. You guys need any multi-stack training, just let me know.
yeah,
Keith lived out there too.
I was pretty much gonna let Todd have my computer and I was gonna sit there, but he showed the
Shit
plate.
show, dude.
And where those systems come into play, those heat pumps that are air cooled, someplace like Alaska Airlines McGee, we're trying to get a gas line to the building, even though it's right off Pack Highway, it was a huge ordeal. And they have an electric boiler. Guess what? You can put in an air cooled heat pump, right? Chiller, and actually produce heat. And I think you probably get heat down to about 25, 20 degrees.
That's awesome.
Yeah. I definitely keep the boiler for backup though.
Oh, yeah.
So Todd's job has the boiler still there. The job that they fell at the heat exchanger that I was dealing with down in Longview, they didn't have one. It was their only sole source. And then of course this last winter we had a couple of that. This last winter we had a couple of those freezing temperatures that were lower than normal. The machine just, and then they fouled up the heat exchanger as well. So
You
fight
still need a
both.
cooling load though. You can't just have a heating load only. You gotta have a cooling load to give the chill water something to do.
If it was water-to-water.
Yeah,
Right. Yeah, well, it's gonna be water to water.
Yeah, but Todd's is just air.
Water to air. Oh.
He's got a heat pump that's
Oh.
an air cooled one.
Yeah.
It's a heat pump, so you can actually produce hot water with it. It's
Yeah.
just pretty much, I think the only time you're gonna see that is if you got a big electric boiler and you can't get a gas line to the building with all the energy stuff going on nowadays. But there you go. That's what you do. But as Todd said, yeah, it was a fun learning experience. And you'll see on all these programs, they're very similar. So once you learn one, you can pretty much, it's pretty easy for you to go into the other one and navigate the screens. They're all very similar on what they mean, okay? And going in and changing set points, whether it's the heat pump one, whether it's the air-cooled, just the chiller itself, or whether it's the DHRC, they're all very similar, okay? And if you keep scrolling down, it'll show you a module 1B status. Okay, and then if you keep scrolling down, it'll actually show you the module that you're on. It'll show you on this one it's a variable flow. It'll show you the flow on. You got your pumps on. It's reading it, and then your valves. Okay, and this one's a variable flow machine. System variable screen, you'll see chiller setup, customer resets, temperature display. This is if you want to change Fahrenheit to Celsius, time and date info, your BAS interface, which I didn't talk about it earlier. We should talk about it real quick. Somebody's got a screwdriver, pop this out, and this is actually where you put your BAS card, and there's going to be a slot down and in. You pop them in, they're a pain in the butt to get in, and they're even worse trying to get them out. I've only had 2 or 3 just pop right in.
You want us to bust that out?
Yeah.
There's a screwdriver.
That's garbage to me, so. All right, factory setup. This is some other settings. This is where you have to enter that passcode I gave you guys earlier.
What passcode?
The air 19.
Yes, boss.
All right, so this is, for the DHRC, this is some of the settings that you're gonna see right here, okay? You're gonna have your heat mode set points, and you're gonna actually tell it on this one whether you wanna enter, if you're gonna wanna control to the entering, which is our upper, lower VSP.
So it's air 19.
You can write it. Jesus, dude, you'd like this to work too.
And then you can also change it if you want to leaving controlled set points, and those are here. So you're either gonna make it so it's gonna do entering or leaving on a DHRC, okay? And then you got your cool mode set points, you're gonna enter those, same thing, you're gonna choose how you wanna do it. And then you're gonna have your TDIF value, mode of operation, load limit. Mode of operation, this is what I was saying, always leave that in auto, always. You're gonna have your load limit, just like on the ASP, your fail indication, your lead compressor. This is where you can change it while you're doing maintenance if you need to, or see what it's doing if you didn't catch it in the screen out front. Number of compressors. On this one, they don't ask for a number of modules, they just ask how many compressors you have. Your sequencing, your indexing, and then your high pressure cutout, and then this has got flush time and flush duration, if that's set up.
Do you have to change the battery in that module?
I haven't.
Looks like I don't think you can.
It would be a pain, but.
Open it up.
You can see it through there.
Yeah, go ahead. That
Crack it open, eh?
It pops open on the ends.
Oh,
There's
okay.
4 little tabs.
Okay.
You can pop it open.
Is that easier than trying to bust it, put
Well,
through that hole?
Nope, you can't put the BAS card in with the cover off.
Oh, gotcha.
I thought the same thing. Okay, customer resets. That's what it's going to kind of look like. Here's your reset type that you want, your signal type. Temperature display, time and date. BAS, this is where you're going to say whether it's enabled and the protocol. And then this stuff here, at times you're just going to want to ignore it. I know a lot of guys will call me up and say, hey, this ID, it's not the actual ID that the BAS is talking. It's there and it shouldn't be. Just ignore the 1. That's not the actual ID of it.
So the network ID, when you go to the next machine, is gonna be 2 though, right? Or no?
No, it'll show 1 as well. That's what I'm saying, just ignore this.
Okay.
I think on the newer software, they started deleting it because it's confusing people. Typically, if you got a network card in the machine, typically they ship them to us separate. And the startup guy will typically install them, and he'll leave the box in there. And if it's a web card with an address, we'll typically leave it in the machine, and it's on the box, okay? I usually put it on my startup form, just in case something ever happens. But a good idea might be, hey, get a label maker and put it in there permanently. The BAS guy doesn't do it. Factory setup, this is where you're gonna go into program. This is where if you had glycol or some other stuff, you could actually change that to like low ambient. I got some machines that were designed to run down to like 30 degrees outside on the ASPs, negative 30. So you actually change the program there. The refrigerant type, the heat exchanger style, whether you're doing an evaporator flow reset and a condenser water flow reset, your capacity control. This is another way to stage it, if I remember right, how you want to bring it on, speed it up, slow it down. You also got compressor minimum off times and compressor cycle times.
When
That's-
we're replacing one of these things, this is all the set point, all the settings you're gonna have to go through to
Yep,
copy down and
yep,
make sure.
write them all down.
So the evaporator and condenser water flow reset, so you can change those from manual to auto?
Yeah.
So Keith, say you lose that PCO3 controller.
Oh,
If you call Multistack, will they pre-program it for, if you give them the model and serial number, or
Yeah.
no? They will.
typically. But I had one that I flew out to in Amman, and I went to put it in, and all of a sudden, a bunch of alarms started happening. It was like, high pressure was the one, and trying to get to the switch was a bear, but I got to it, and it wasn't tripped. And then it turns out they sent it with the wrong software.
So just get one of those mouses, or those, okay.
And I know you have one, but you just don't have that connection.
Right.
And so, when we go to leave tonight, I'll throw the software on your computer so it's just ready to go. But just like the ASPs, you got these two settings too. Compressor minimum off time, and you got compressor cycle time. So you can play with those too. You know, if you got them coming on and off, that's another place to look at what that's set at. Same with yours too. You know, I think we pretty much set yours up when it was like 20 degrees outside. And the DHRCs typically aren't shipped with this leaving chilled water sensor in place, but some customers buy it. Guys don't realize that you need to turn it on. So if you guys ever get one of these machines, it's a good idea just to see if that's been turned on and if it's actually there. Because the machine will still run without it, it'll just kind of not run as good. So, and I have seen them where the machine that they're installed, like the contractors gone ahead and put them in, but the startup person hasn't noticed it and just left it off. And then on this one, the software, you can actually get in here and actually do a factory reset here with the software too. That's what that means. You wipe everything clean. So some of the softwares actually have that built into the factory set point area.
So anything that's been changed by somebody else, if you factory reset it, does it go back to the original program?
All
Or just
defaults.
blanks?
Defaults.
Okay,
Then you gotta go through to reprogram everything again.
all right.
Variable flow machine here. So they even got approach here. Minimum valves. You got PID set up. If you start playing with these PIDs, definitely get a hold of the factory. They've actually told me the wrong direction. So you're gonna wanna get that in writing. They kind of get confused whether it should be lower one way and their softwares. Some software's one direction, some software's the other. So just get what software you have and then contact them. So far I've never had to change those. Everything's been pretty good, just right from the default. Okay, fault review. You're gonna see different types of faults here. These are system faults. And these are the type of module faults you could see.
So Keith, on the module faults, you have to reset at each module.
At the module that's in alarm.
Okay, you can't reset that through the,
Yeah, what I always do is I disconnect that COM wire off the top. I'll go ahead and kill power to that module, reset it, verify that it's reset. Usually you'll get a COM error. I'll throw the COM wire back on, give it 30 seconds to maybe 2 minutes at the most. That COM failure should go away. Go over to the master, you might see one there, but it should clear. You might have to go ahead and reset it there. Every kind of alarm has got a different situation. Okay. And this is that COM error I was kind of talking about. So you'll see COM error. It'll give you info if there is on what was going on at that time. Okay. So module 2's got a fault right there. Load profile, this is what we were talking about earlier, total hours to load percentage, 0 to 9, and you got it all the way up to 100%. So you can actually tell where this machine likes to run. And this one pretty much likes to run between 70 and 89% most of the time.
If you have an alarm on the master, can you pull that COM port and cycle power the master while the slaves still run?
No, so what will happen is as soon as you do that,
Slaves turn off.
the slaves won't see anything and everything's just gonna shut off.
So you're gonna get that COM alarm throughout everything.
Yep. So if you
Might as well just not pull the COM wire
on the master. So like a fail to run mode module though, if you have that, as soon as you kill the master, everything lights up. Yeah. So if those modules say, hey, I need cooling, they're all gonna turn on. If 5 of them out of 10 say I need cooling, they're gonna turn
You're
on.
not gonna have that mostly though.
It's only gonna be like in a critical.
Environment, yeah.
And then this is where you can lock the customer out if you need to. Just a 5-letter password. And if for some reason somebody's got this locked and you guys are on a service call, factory reset will wipe that out, but you're gonna take all your settings out too. So, you know, if you're comfortable with, hey, I think I can maneuver through the machine and set this up where it probably needs to, but I need to get this password out of there, that's one way of doing it.
Just call you guys have all the factory.
Yeah, but, you know, like on a weekend or something,
gotcha.
you know, right?
And then there's another one. What's that one that the control system's talking to it too much? What was that alarm? You remember?
Talking too much.
Yeah,
It writes to the program too much, and it happens on carriers too.
and it's not in any of the
It's not in any of the manuals, and it'll show up,
It's called spouse alarm.
yeah, it'll show up, system variables full, read write full or something, and it'll be right on that thing. And basically what it was Allerton was pinging it for information like every 3 seconds or 2 seconds, and it was too fast, so we had to slow it down to like once every 5 minutes.
Allerton's done that to like UPS cards.
Yeah, I guess they're known for doing it. I didn't know, but I heard they did it they screw up the carrier modules too, the pick.
Yeah. So and the only way around that would be to talk to the BAS guy, get them to stop pinging it so much, but also if you kind of need that alarm to go away, that's where the factory reset would come into play, to wipe it and then reprogram it real
Do you
quick.
ever see other alarms that aren't on the building?
Mainly just that one that Todd's talking about. He had called me up, I forget where I was, and asked me about it. I was like,
Is it a book?
No, I was like, I don't know, and luckily I was on basically gonna be making a phone call to the factory anyways, and started asking, and everybody was like, kind of, for a minute, they're like, what are you talking about? And that's sure enough what it is, they're just pinging it too often. Okay, this is a good thing to ask for too if you're changing out the VFD drive, okay? I get mine straight from the factory. And even on startup, sometimes even though they're doing, they're run testing them, sometimes some of the programming is still kind of goofy. So if you're changing out a drive, I'd be asking CMS for this. This is right from the factory on how it's supposed to be programmed. And these are just ones that they've gone in and typically changed. Okay? So that way if you get it, just the drive. So if you get it, right, just tell them, hey, I want the sheet from the factory. That way, oh no, it'll come pre-programmed. Just, I want the sheet with it.
Okay.
So that way if you get to the job, just real quick, go through it real fast, just double check the factory and make sure they get it, okay?
And then another thing I found out with those Yakisawa drives is they'll go blank on you. They'll just go blank and the connection fans won't work. So I thought I had a bad drive. Well, I didn't have a bad drive. Turned it off, turned power off to the module for like 4 minutes, and turned it back on, and everything came back up again.
Sweet.
It's happened twice now, on different modules, so. I think just sitting there, because those were the modules that weren't running. So.
They got bored.
They got bored, it's kinda like a lever panel, they go all funky.
I think this is probably the main thing that Todd probably wants you guys to see. I think this is how to install the software.
Yeah.
You guys want to take a quick break before we get into this? No, just hit it.
You wait.
There should be sound. Oh, it's all the way up.
What time is that? Move the sound.
Oh, is there something coming through there?
Supposed to be. Look at dials.
Before we can send out new software, we need to know what software is currently in the chiller. To check what software is currently in the controller, first we need to press the PRG button to bring us into the main menu. Once in the main menu, pressing the PRG and up arrow buttons at the same time will give us the version screen for the controller. If the module boards have displays, this procedure can be done with them as well to verify that all boards have the same program. The version number will be the part that starts with either MS or MC. If the reason for installing the new software is a board replacement, the new board has to be addressed before it will accept the new program. The first step, with no power on the board, is to press and hold the alarm and up arrow buttons. Continue to hold these buttons and don't let go until told otherwise. Apply power to the board. The controller will first show on the screen, loading. After a few seconds, it will change to self-test, please wait. After another few seconds, that will change to PLAN address. You can now remove your fingers from the alarm and up arrow buttons. You can now use the up and down arrows to set the address and then enter to accept the new address. A master controller is always addressed as 30. The modules are addressed numerically with module 1 as address 1, module 2 with address 2, and so on. The last step before actually installing a new program is to write down all of the settings in the system variables menu. This must include the settings in all 6 of the system variables menus. Those menus include chiller setup, customer resets, temperature display, time and date info, BAS interface, and factory setup. Remember, the settings in the factory setup require a password to make changes. Once we have done the pre-installation steps of addressing and writing down all of our settings, we can now do the actual installation. Our first step is to power down the master controller. We do this by unplugging the J1 plug or opening a breaker that feeds the controller. Then, unplug the J11 plug. This will remove the communications from the other boards. Next, we need to plug in the program key, also known as a Carel smart key, into the J10 port. Note, never plug or unplug a key while power is applied. Now that the key is installed, reapply power to the board. Wait while the key blinks and flashes until the start button and the arrow pointing to the controller stay solidly lit. Once the lights are now solidly lit, press the start button. The arrow will begin to blink very slowly. The blinking will get faster and faster until the arrow is solid again, and you hear a ringing sound like this one. That ringing tells us that the programming is finished. From the time you press the start button to the time when the key rings could be anywhere from 3 to 5 minutes. You can now power down the board and unplug the program key. The master is now programmed. Now we need to continue on to the module boards. With power off to the board, unplug the J11 plug just like on the master. Then plug in the key to the J10 plug. Continue with the module boards just like what was done with the master. Apply power, wait for the lights to go solid and press the start button. Then wait for the ringing before powering down and going to the next board. Once all the boards are reprogrammed, then the J11 plugs on each board can be plugged back in. Once the programming of all the boards is finished, a factory reset will need to be completed. The factory reset is done with some simple button pushes during the booting process of any board with a screen showing a 12-second delay during that boot process. To do a factory reset, apply power to the controller. First you will see loading, then that will change to self-test, please wait. After the self-test, please wait, the controller begins a 12-second countdown. During this countdown, press the program and up buttons together for 2 seconds. Then the alarm and down buttons for 2 seconds. You will notice the time delay will stop. This is showing us that the factory reset is in progress. The controller will then come to the on-off menu to show that it has completed the reset. To finish, turn the power off. Wait 5 seconds, then power all the boards back on at once. Don't forget to put the settings that you wrote down back into the controller. Thank you for your time.
Yeah. So it's powered up. There's no software in it right now. I actually had an issue with this one, but because where I was at, I couldn't deal with it. We had to just put a spare in and just kind of take this off the job site. So if you guys want, grab the mouse, see if you guys can try to put software in it, see if we can get it to work.
How'd you get it to power up?
Different plug.
Put the wires on the right plug. I didn't catch it earlier.
Put up the column.
Now it has that input.
That's all right. I mean, it's not going back to the job. So
So you put different programs based on what controller you got?
Yep.
Yeah.
So that one there, it's for an ASP. It's like a version 105. They're already up to version 140.
What are you doing?
Well, you know which is J9 or J10?
Yeah, don't you gotta pull power first and put this in?
Yep. So I'm just gonna let you do it. And then don't forget, you might want to set the address before you put that in too.
Get the parameters out of it first.
Yeah, write them all down.
What's that?
Before I put this in?
Mm-hmm.
I gotta plug this back into the address or this?
No. Plug this in, give it power, and then you're gonna be treating it just like you killed the circuit breaker. And then you're gonna want to go in and set the address. Because the address is basically going to say whether it's the master or the slave when you pick the software.
You know when you hit stop thing loading?
And yeah, this might be locked up. You might have to just try to run it manually, and it might not. This might not work. It's a long story about the job I was on.
Oh, we're old.
Was there an error on the print?
I don't even know that to do this. Yeah, mine's toast too. Living the dream. Yeah. That was the one I got from Randy. Fucking shop.
So if there's a
Let's just try it real quick.
if there's a different program here than the one you need, will it not let you download it?
It'll override it.
Yeah, oh, so it will.
So you're only gonna put like one series of programs in there. So like this one, it's for the ASP. It's version 105.
So every time we use this, we need to go back to the computer and make sure the right program's in this.
Yeah.
When you plug this into
Or put a little note on it.
well, it'll have the previous program in it.
Yeah,
Remember?
the previous one,
it'll
but
keep it.
if I go to a different machine or.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Luckily, I was on 3 different job sites, and
You got 3 of
luckily,
these floating around?
no, luckily all 3 of those had the same software. So
Oh,
I
so
was
you don't
like,
carry 3 different ones, or?
no, I just basically I can't use my Mac. I'll talk to the customer, and they'll give me a PC. I'll download the software, and I'll just have the factory email me what we need.
Sure.
And then I'll just put it on there, and then I go back to the job the next day and go.
Gotcha.
And typically, you know, like the situation I was in, I was 12 hours ahead, so when I was getting off work, the factory wasn't even started yet.
Gotcha.
So I just shot them an email. By the time I woke up and went to go back to
You
work.
got the program you need to download
Yeah.
that.
Oh. Is that a lot of it?
And they're only 2 hours ahead of reports. And then like Todd's job, we just kept it, we actually used the customer's laptop. So he's actually got Carel software sitting on that job site, and he's got the different versions that we've had to use.
Gotcha.
4. Well, 2 of them we erased because they were garbage. Then
We really didn't want that one.
Well, we asked them to do one thing, and they altered the pressure ratio settings, and they lowered them so low, and when it got cold outside, it started to shut the machine down. And of course, I was reading literature, and I was like, well, it's supposed to be doing this, it's supposed to be doing that. By the time I got a hold of somebody in the factory, they were like, no, we just altered that. I was like, well, you need to send me a different one, put it back, and they know, so we had to put the old software.
So when Todd's working on it, only goes down to like 20 degrees or something, even though it's 14 day.
We ran it at 18 degrees.
Yeah.
And it still puts out heat.
120 degree water. It works good now that it's running, right?
You can't you effectively just get rid of a cooling tower and a boiler and run one of those big air-cooled chillers on a hydronic loop or something? Hydronic heat pump loop? Get rid of a tower and a boiler?
No,
You need that other data.
they do have a whole nother machine that they're coming out with, and it's got some issues. I think Mandy was telling me that McQuade tried that years ago. To the new one.
Yeah.
So I don't even know. We don't want to talk about it. It'll do both, and not only will it do basically like a DHRC water side on both sides.
Yeah.
But it'll also do air.
Yeah, you guys sign in.
Yeah. So you can select what you want to like pull heat or reject heat to.
Sounds cool. It worked.
Yeah, I was hoping that we'd actually don't get it to work. It was actually the software that put in the key originally, that's why I couldn't get it to work. So I put new software in, so it would work.
I'll be a foot short.
You guys got any questions on anything else? I just kind of went over basics.
A lot more than before.
Call Todd, that's the difference.
Call Todd.
Don't call me.
Call Todd.
Call Keith.
Saturday morning.
Nope. I don't answer it anymore.
I got his personal too.
No. Call Todd.
Call McNall. They're not gonna eat all that. I'll take a plate, so.
Just give them all McNall.
Evan leftover?
Shot, Keith. Yeah.
Crazy. Whole thing of veggie.
You still got your big truck? I was open.
Oh, yeah.
Hit another deer with my F-150, so I got.
You just killed it.
Well, thanks, sir. That was awesome.
That's awesome.
No problem. If you guys got any questions, just let Todd know, and I can always try to
Yeah, I
answer
want
them.
to get a new truck here soon. You like it?
All comes back to you, Todd, see ya.
Nope. I'm all going back to the beach when they ask me.
Yeah, it sucks you down, but once you're out.
Hold on, let me ask you.
Like, it's a bus turnaround.
Todd's always on the phone.
Just send me an email, I'll just forward that
You
back
have
for
boat
you.
and everything, so you still have your big boat?
Yeah.
Awesome.
So that's why I figured
Yeah.
it's good to get enough.
Yeah. Hey, so-
I like your idea of putting all these in your things that you got from Delta Airlines. Heck yeah, man. I'm gonna fly a lot of Delta.
So you do
Oh,
have a
yeah.
big old. There's some foil.
Yeah, it's got 22
Jeez.
The only problem now is there's so many in like the bag that when I pull them out on the roof, I'm like, fuck, which one am I gonna
You
open?
allow her to get in that thing.
Yeah.
What are these from? Delta Airlines, when you fly business class, they give you that, and it's a whole toiletry kit. Really? Oh, they treat it like a fucking, yeah. Pair of slippers to give you when you get in first class.
Oh, shit.
Wow.
It's good on drive real slow, all through town, like,
Back in?
you know, like, gas.
That's just how I spotted that, because I,
Look behind
Jimmy?
you, relax on top.
you check and make sure you got everything?
Yeah.
You know,
You don't trust anybody. Where's the log?
you forget he's known us for how long?
She travel as much anymore?
Like, I haven't been away that long.
Yeah. I know Todd tends to put like my tools in his pockets too when I'm working with
She's got
him.
a truck, she's got paper.